We want to talk about thought habits. So I just want to start with this shoulding concept that I was sort of joking about when I started the episode, but it's really powerful. So if we say don't should on yourself or something related to that, what does that mean to you?
hmm Well, let me start with just explaining what a thought habit is, because the vast majority of our thoughts are happening at the subconscious level. So there is a part of our brain that is conscious and aware and thinking. It's like 83,000 thoughts a day consciously we have. But under the surface, it's something like between 3 and 4 million subconscious habits of thinking. And some of those are so great because if we had to think about breathing, or we had to think about where our toothbrush is so that we could brush our teeth, it would just be exhausting to live.
Right.
And so a lot of that built in thinking is preserving energy so that we can survive and thrive. However, there are also habits of thinking that are impacting the way that we interact with the world, other people in it, our work, our ability to embrace structures and things in our day to day lives that we're unaware of. And yet we are fighting against them and getting these outcomes that we really don't love. So, specifically, the habit of thinking that measures obligation
Hmm.
is in the section of the Habit Finder assessment tool that has to do with making plans, dreaming about the future, envisioning what it is that you want to create. Well, if it's bogged down with a lot of thinking that sounds like I have to, I need to, and I should, the process of creating anything, if it's a business, a family, a new romantic relationship, is like climbing a mountain. So if you can imagine, there's an incline to creation, there's a natural exertion. Energy is released when we're creating something, right? But when you add the habit of thinking that says, I need to, I have to, I should, it's as if you're strapping on a 100-pound backpack and then climbing up that same mountain. You're going to have the exertion anyhow, but you're adding this drag to the experience. So, this habit of thinking is very pervasive. Often, if you find it in one place, it's happening all over your life. And the fastest way to know whether it's bogging you down is to just start to pay attention. I have to take the garbage out. I really need to call and get that doctor's appointment. I should be going to the gym every day. That project I'm behind on, I need to have that done by Friday. You'll hear yourself saying it out loud all the time. I need
Yes.
to, I have to, I should. So it's this very sneaky, pervasive habit of thinking that, again, you're just adding a drag to your progress with it that is unnecessary and subconscious. You're not doing it on purpose.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This is why I knew I was going to be excited to talk about this. I was actually chatting with a friend a few weeks ago, and she was talking about her business. She owns a franchise, and she was saying, have to this, have to that, have to this, have to that. And I said, what if you said those same things and said, I want to? And she was like, just it was hard to even imagine. And it just kind of shifted everything. So, yeah, it's powerful.
Absolutely. And there are a couple of ways you're providing one, but without knowing probably the science even behind it. But when you want to disrupt a subconscious habit of thinking, there are only a few ways that you have a fighting chance. And one is to bring the thought to the surface and actually speak it out loud. So if you hear yourself in your mind saying, I have to, I need to, I should, saying it, saying like, I have to, and kind of questioning it, but also using some sort of physical disruption. So sometimes I'll teach clients to use this. It's kind of like an axe. If you can imagine, one hand is flat and I'm like chopping wood on the top of my hand, where I'm chopping, like saying stop and cutting off that habit of thinking with a physical disruption that brings the subconscious habit of thinking to the surface and gives me even a fighting chance. The other, of course, is talking out loud. So if you hear yourself say, I need to, actually pausing and saying out loud, I get to, I
Mm,
choose to, or I want to. Those three options of saying out loud, I choose to set the timer on my phone and work on this report for 30 minutes versus I really need to get that report done. And you can even feel, I can feel the energy in my body shift when I use those two options. So
yeah.
that physical or standing up, but really saying something out loud to yourself, talking out loud to yourself gives you a fighting chance, or using some sort of physical disruption that causes you to bring the thought to the surface and be able to choose a different thought.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Really good tools for people to try for sure. And it always, when you say a physical disruption, it always reminds me of kind of the old fashioned thing of putting a rubber band on your wrist and flicking the rubber band, you know?
Mhm.
But there was something
Mhm.
to that for sure. Yeah.
It absolutely, yes. It and I've seen people do that where they switch hands too. If they do something, they have to
Mm,
switch hands with the rubber band just as a physical representation of, oh, there it is again. I'm observing it.
right, right. We're retraining our brains a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So, in particular, the should thing, I think gets a lot of us stuck because I don't know, there's something about should, and you called it obligation energy when we were talking before. And so I just want to talk about that because there's something about should that almost makes me think I need to do this, but I don't want to, is what's wrapped up in that word. And I think
Mm,
maybe that's what you mean by obligation, right?
yeah. Well, and there's expectation tied up around it. You're measuring yourself against some standard that could be real or it could be manufactured in your own brain. It could be just a random expectation that you've grown attached to around how many times you should be doing something per week or per day or fulfilling some sort of obligation. That's another really interesting thought around obligation is like, whose expectation is it?
Yeah.
And is it yours or is it just some, I think about expectations around exercise, particularly for women, right? Or taking care of our bodies. I should be measured in this certain way. I'm reading this book right now called Normal Sucks. It's
Hmm.
so delightful. But they basically said that they're tracing the origins of the word normal and these expectations we have around even the size of our bodies and where they came from, or the way our brains function and where it came from. And all of these normal standards, what they basically found was that no one met them. So we have these
Wow.
expectations that were created by some guy 500 years ago, and it's unattainable, and we're chasing after it for what? So
Right.
there's also some deeply embedded like expectation thinking there also that we get to choose whether we embrace or we chase or we give our energy to.
Yeah, such a good point because I guess it could be that we're trying to meet somebody's expectations who's important in our life, a spouse or something like that. Or it could be random people on the internet that we're comparing ourselves to. Or it could be, anything, right? And some of those things are a lot more powerful than others.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think of the Barbie movie. And actually, I don't know if you've seen that, but there's a scene where she, pretend obviously, meets the woman who invented Barbies. And the woman who invented Barbies is basically saying, I didn't mean for all this to happen, and the whole company was run by men. And obviously, Barbie's measurements aren't even realistic. And so it was just very interesting take on how we why would we aspire to something that's not even real?
That's a really great example and an awesome movie for so many reasons. But
Yeah.
it challenges a lot of those assumptions and those obligation think, the obligation thinking around what our bodies should look like, how often we should be exercising them or moving them, or what kinds of foods we should be putting in them, and what's okay and what's not okay around that. And who decided that? In the end, turns out it's some woman who accidentally created something that then blew up into this phenomenon and became this standard she never really even wanted for women.
Right. Right.
There's a lot of that happening across the board. So I love challenging those assumptions and those expectations.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, let's then take that a little bit further because I think should and this obligation idea is probably part of something bigger that is something that women struggle with a lot, and that's this idea of, can we have it all? Can we spend time with our family? Can we have faith if that's something that we want? Can we have success? Can we be ambitious? Can we be a good person? Can we do all those things? And the answer, I think we feel like, is probably no, but I think you might say differently. So, can we have it all?
I know it's a loaded question, right? I will say we can have it all with boundaries in place on our goals and ambition that protect our other priorities.
Mhm.
So I'll give you a triangle illustration that I use a lot in my work with clients that helps me keep boundaries on my goals. So we talk a ton about boundaries with relationships with people. I actually talk more about boundaries with our goals and our ambition, which I think ties into this idea of having it all, right? I want this very successful career or business. I want this beautiful family and community outside of that work. And then I want to have this very purposeful existence, right? So when I'm creating or deciding whether something is a yes or a no, I have this triangle that I use, which on one side says quality of life, meaning for me, that is, I want to work like a teacher and get paid like a CEO. So I'm going to work from 8 to 3, have weekends off, have breaks when kids are off. My husband is in education, so that kind of works in the rhythm of our family. I'm just coming off a really light summer. I like summers to be pretty chill and just have some time to replenish. My body works really well in that rhythm of a teacher schedule. So, quality of life. And then also, is it paying me what I'm worth? So, am I being compensated in like absolutely what I deserve to be compensated for this thing? And then the bottom would be purpose and passion. Does it align with my purpose or passion? Right. So, all the time, I'm bucking up against these boundaries that I've set. And I'll give you an example. I had a potential client reach out. We had this such a great conversation. I was like, he is my people. Like, this is why I do this work, you know? And at the end of the hour conversation, she said, it's a yes. I'm in. I'm like, I'm so excited to get started. And she said, okay, the only thing is I can only do calls with you at like 6 p.m. or later during the week.
Mm,
And so this is where, can you have it all? Kind of, right? I
yeah.
have built this very robust business. I do have a great quality of life, but I also have to say no a lot to things that I really would love to do. So it aligned with, it was going to pay me what I was worth. She was like all in on that. It aligned with my passion and purpose to the point that it was like welling up in me and overflowing, but it compromised my quality of life. And if it's not a yes in all three, for me, it's a no, because I can have it all so long as I protect those things. And
Mhm.
that has meant also that the pace of growth in the things that I have built has been slower than it could have been at times because I'm protecting the integrity of that quality of life along with building the thing. So, can you have it all? Of course. Will it be flashy and will you be on the cover of the magazines? Maybe, but probably not. It'll probably be a more consistent kind of growth that grows sort of over years of time and builds upon itself. And for some people, they want the flash, right? That was never appealing to me. I didn't have the luxury. I had 3 kids. I had things that were high priority. I didn't have the luxury of having a season where I just neglected them. And
Mhm.
so I took that as not that I couldn't have it all, that it might take me 5 years to build what's for someone else might take one. And there's no judgment in the one, no judgment. It's just the choice I made very intentionally along the way of creating what I was creating included those other elements.
Well,
So
I'm really glad that we're talking about this. And I'm glad we're talking about this because it feels like it's kind of avoiding some of this shoulding that we were talking about, right? Because you've
100%.
given yourself, here's what I want unapologetically, these are my things, and this is how I make a decision.
Absolutely. And I'm choosing it. I'm having agency. That is having it all. That's
Yeah,
having it all right there, right? Is when you have complete agency and choice and you are choosing to create. That doesn't mean that there aren't misses or there that I didn't feel like, oh, when I had to say no to this really amazing woman, right? But I just know that I can have it all so long as I honor those boundaries that I've created. Because in order to have a healthy relationship with anything, you need boundaries. And so that applies to goals, that applies to careers, that applies to businesses as well. You cannot be in a relationship that's not codependent with something like that if there aren't boundaries in place.
absolutely. And boundaries are such a hot topic of conversation right now, but I'm not sure people really understand always what that means. So I like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, I like that you're creating something that it comes exactly from what you want, and you're kind of creating this measuring tool to look at what's going on in life.
Absolutely. Yes. And also, boundaries require that you are in touch with your intuition and that you're paying attention to how something feels to you inside and that you honor and trust that. And so, there's a level of self awareness that's required for you to live a boundaried life in relationships with people, with goals, with work. With all of that, because there has to be this trust of that little inner whisper that just says, like, I don't like this, or this is enough, or I want to protect this. There's got to be an honoring of that before you can actually withstand the pressures that are going to push on the boundaries every day from
Hmm.
all of those areas.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening and they're thinking, well, I like this idea of the triangle that I should measure things by, what would your advice be? Do they need to pick three things, or how could they go about kind of creating something like that for themselves?
Mhm. Well, I would actually just borrow my 3, but define them for yourself. So, what is your quality of life? Because not everyone wants to work that same schedule. Some people enjoy working more, or they don't need to have that much time off, or they don't have as much happening outside of work at this season of life. And so they can work more. So, I think it's more about you defining what those boundaries are for you in each of those 3 areas of quality of life, which is basically how much are you going to work? How much are you going to give to this pursuit that is firing your ambition and that you want to create something? What do you deserve to get paid? I do a lot
Mm.
of work on this. That's like a whole nother
Ooh.
podcast, but yes, right. So what is enough? What do you deserve? What does that have to say about your relationship with yourself? Money is a mirror that is so powerful. And then also this purpose. What is your purpose? How do you show up and serve the world? What is it that you bring that is unique in alignment with your natural genius that you are contributing in this one and only life that you have? So to me, those 3 work for everyone, but
Mhm.
the difference in how you can define them is infinite. Anyone could do what they want with it.
Yeah, anything. I like that a lot. Perfect. And now I'm sitting here thinking, well, gosh, how would I say mine? So I guess I have some
I
work to do.
know.
Well, circling back to the money thing for just a second, you're right that it's a whole separate episode. And I have done 3 or 4 episodes on both money thoughts and actual money issues. So, I mean, this is big, huge. And I think in your book, I see you have a chapter on this as well. Is that right?
I
Yeah.
do. Chapter 8 is called Money is a Mirror. And it is really all about, it's not about having a budget, how you manage your money at all. It's about paying attention to what your money has to teach you. If we pay attention to money and our reactions to it, we can learn a lot about our own feeling of value, our own worthiness, our own fears, our own unhealed pain. We can just watch money and learn so much. But also, when we give our power away to money to allow us or to cause us to feel a certain way. So when money is good, I feel good. When money is bad, I feel bad, right? We are giving away our power to an inanimate object, actually, that is just a thing, right? First. And then what we're actually doing is losing the opportunity to attract more to us. So when we are detached from money and just observing it and letting it move and creating movement with money, meaning it's coming in, we're enjoying it, we're letting it go out, both in generosity and in spending, and not being clingy or weird about it, not having a lot of judgment around decisions made with money for other people or ourselves. Money tends to free flow
Hmm.
in abundant quantities, but we block it up with all of our subconscious habits of thinking, with all of our story, with all of our programming. I feel guilty for making this much. I don't want people to think this about me. I mean, there's layers and layers
I
and
shouldn't
layers,
charge
right?
this much. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. But if you think about money, it's a little bit like water. We need it to survive, but we aren't trying to store water in our bodies. We're just
Mm.
putting it in on a regular basis. We're letting it go out on a regular basis, right? And we know we need it to survive. It has to move through us, but the movement is the point. The movement is what you want. And when you let it move, then it tends to move in larger and larger quantities. It's a beautiful thing. It tends to move toward us and through us in larger quantities when we do that work on money. There's so much there.
I really like the way you put that because I often say it slightly differently, but I think we're saying the same thing. And I often say money is energy, and you can kind of see what you're judging and what you're accepting and what you're fighting against by looking at what's going on with money. And so you're kind of saying the same thing. And it's such a powerful thing because this is one area where we really do should on ourselves all the time. And maybe it's that we should be making more, maybe it's that we should be making less. Who knows? Everybody has their thing, right?
Yeah. Or that we can only make it if we're going to give it away. That's when I hear a ton from women is I want to make more so I can give it away. Money does not move toward that energy at all, by the way. Now you can make more and choose to give more away, but it doesn't move toward the energy of I can only make this if I'm going to give it away.
Ooh.
That's a
Ooh.
really, really common message that I hear women say all the time. I want to make more so I can support other causes. Again, you can make more and support other causes with more generosity, but money doesn't move toward you for that reason alone. There has to be a feeling of worthiness, a feeling of value, a feeling of owning it that allows the money to move in larger quantities. And then you get to choose what to do with it at that.
Yeah.
But if you can even just separate yourself from money. I wrote down this morning, even in my own meditation and reflection time, I had some like old money stories coming up to the surface and I just wrote them down. I literally can't remember what one of them is right now because once I wrote it down, it like went on
Good.
its way. It
Mhm.
just, I just let it move through me and out. But I definitely, it's a daily practice for me of rewiring this relationship that I have with money, the energy of money. I love that. Yeah.
So when you said this point about women saying they want to make more so they can give more away, and that doesn't work. I had sort of this interesting thought pop into my head that could it be that in most of those situations, we are telling ourselves that we shouldn't be asking for more money or we shouldn't be
Yes.
making more?
Or
And
it's
so,
shameful to make it unless you give it away,
yeah, yeah, fascinating.
which I vehemently reject on so many levels, right? But also know that the people in our world who have the best relationships with money do not frame it that way. I'm not talking about the world's wealthiest people. I'm talking about the people who have the healthiest relationships with this thing called money. And some of those people have gobs of money, and some of them have an amount that feels like enough to them. And some
Mm.
of them choose to live on very little money. That's not what determines the health of your relationship with money. However, also I know that any of those people, if you ask them, could turn on the spigot and earn more at any time if they wanted to. And they would tell you that, and they would do that without hesitation or feeling any judgment around it. So that's what tells me that they have a healthy relationship with it, is that they know that at any time, if they wanted to, there's an unlimited supply and they can access it as needed. And that money, they deserve money to move toward them. They can receive it and receive it and receive it, and then make choices to do with it what they want.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So, overall, I think what I'm hearing from you is that if we can create some, I'm going to say triangle, there's got to be a better word, but some sort of measurement for things in our lives where we're looking at what we want quality of life to look like and what we want income to look like and what we want our passions to look like, then maybe that can pull us out of some of this should and have to and need to stuff that maybe we're saying should and need to because we don't really want to. And
Mhm.
we want to have a way of making a decision that keeps us in the is this what I really want energy as opposed to should and, and somebody else telling us. Is that a kind of a fair summary?
Yes. And if the becoming more threatens you subconsciously in any way, you will revert back to those old patterns of should, have to, and need to. Sometimes those are protective measures because if you really operated from a different mindset, you might actually do something great, and that might draw attention to you, or that might create a level of income that you're not really feeling worthy of, or that might pull into question a relationship that you're in that won't give you space for that kind of growth. So sometimes those habits of thinking are protective measures that keep us stuck and in place because we're hardwired to survive. And so you're going to buck those when you start to move forward, knowing that it's going to bring some of that stuff to the surface too. So, yes, and I'll add.
Woo. Yeah, that gave me goosebumps a little bit. So there's always work to be done, right? On our mindset when it comes to how we see ourselves and what we see that we can do, what we believe we can do, for sure.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, this is almost just the start of a conversation around that, but I think people will have some takeaways for sure. So, how can people find you, connect with you, or learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. I'll give you three different ways. The first is through my book, which just launched in February of 2024. It's titled I See You, and it's written for women who want more income and influence and impact without more work. And the themes that we've talked about today all exist in the book. They're the things I work with all of the time, but this book was written for someone, for these women that I work with, and then not necessarily about something. It's very much like a conversation, like the one we've had today. So, book. Second would be my website, which is just my name, Amy Kemp, AMYKEMP.com. And you can learn all about the work I do there. Also, there's a fun section about the book that has a lot of free video content and some fun conversations around these topics that you can access there. They're on YouTube as well. And then last, I love to have people follow me on Instagram. It's just at Amy Kemp Inc. And you can follow my work there and kind of life as well. So I would invite you just into the community of the work I do.
Excellent. And I know I follow you on Instagram and I've seen you doing some cool stuff recently. So, yes, I definitely recommend that to people.
Love
Okay,
it.
well, before we stop this episode, I do need to ask you this last question that I ask everyone. And so, listeners already know that we have a nostalgia playlist on Spotify and Amazon Music. And so, tell us a song that either has happy memories attached or kind of a feeling of nostalgia for you.
I love it. Okay, I thought about this because I have some from further back, but a most recent, maybe this was an anthem for me, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, is the Pink song called All I Know So Far.
Ooh.
Both because it's like I use the word anthem because it's, Pink, she's kind of like badass anyhow, but it has this strength, but also this tenderness, this very vulnerable. If you listen to the words, she's like, if you let things crack, lets the light in, right? There's this vulnerability and strength combination in not only the words, but in the sound of the music. It's just one of my all-time favorite songs. I listen to it still when I need a reminder of who I am and kind of a boost of courage or just a boost of like rootedness. So highly recommend All I Know So Far by Pink.
You know what? I love that. And there's a few Pink songs that I love to listen to kind of pep me up and get my energy up. But this one is not one of those. So I'm excited
Mm,
to familiarize myself. Yeah.
it's great.
Wonderful. And I agree with you. She is amazing and really goes for it and does what she wants to do. So that's a good example for what we've been talking about as well.
Yes.
Well, Amy, thank you for joining me today. I have really enjoyed the discussion. And I think people will have a lot of things to take away and think about and try out maybe when they catch themselves doing the should and have to and need to. So thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great.